same time, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum decided to launch this initiative, something quite unique in the region, and also appointed, as you said, minister for it. And I would say AI needs to be framed in this strategy, and why AI is so important for this region, for Dubai, for the UAE. It's not just a matter of cutting costs and boosting the GDP. What we want to achieve is a completely, I would say, disruptive view of the current world. We want to enhance, to improve every sector, from education, healthcare, transportation, logistics. And it is within this initiative that as Smart Dubai government, we started meeting a number of government entities. There are more than 40 government entities in Dubai, and we met already 11 from RPA to HDA, DHA, and we met on a series of workshops. And what we did, we spotted almost 100 use cases, AI-based use cases. And subsequently, we narrowed them into 28 projects. And now we are going to lead and deliver this project from now to the end of 2018. And talking about, really exciting stuff. Synchronizing the sensors across lights for improving traffic, for example. Or if you have kids, maybe you're going to choose the best school for your kids based on the number of parameters, maybe based on your kid's attitude. And so, a number of influence.
So you mentioned use cases, and I guess all of these are innovation opportunities. And I think that positions in well into what Hans-Henrik here is doing, since you're incubating startups and also accelerating startups. What type of adoption have you seen with AI, and what type of interesting things have you seen coming into your different programs, smart city programs, or other incubation activities?
Thanks for that, Jean-Luc. Yeah, so representing the government today, DTEC, by the way, is a subsidiary, or not a subsidiary, a department of Dubai Silicon Oasis, which is a technology-free zone, some 15 minutes away from here. Just to allude to, comment on what you're saying, there's a big project in Dubai government, they call Open Data. That's the basis for all what's going to come later on. So you can see the Dubai government is going at it at an extremely sophisticated way. They say the first thing you need to do is find out what data is important. So we are one of the free zones that are spearheading that. My small department, we have delivered all the data, we gathered all the data we could, and sent it to the government, the respective government department, and said, now you tell us, can you use this? And this is happening all over Dubai. So this is really cool, because that means once we know what data is important, then we can crunch it the right way. Once we can crunch it the right way, I hope there will be some enormous productivity improvement going forward. Now, turning back to your question, Jean-Luc, what we're seeing in our center, and we have some 810 technology startups, which have popped up the past 2.5 to 3 years. It's about 4 to 5 companies per week that we are establishing. I think it's only the past 2 or 3 years that I see more and more AI companies. There are some really, really great companies out there. I'll give you one example. They have an app, it's called Wrap Up. There's tons of data in meetings. Imagine who was having a meeting today with someone? Really? I don't believe you. Okay, I had about 3 or 4 meetings, right? Now, that's, and I sat with a lot of different people, talking to a lot of different people. It's absolutely impossible to remember all this information, right? So there was this young guy who was hired as an intern, and he got this really boring job to sit and take notes from the meeting. So he came up with a way of like a Siri type artificial intelligence that could understand what people were saying, and it could understand the different voices. So it could simultaneously take up what everybody is speaking. This company is called WrapUp. You can download the app, and it even goes further than that. It takes up all the information, and then you can start analyzing the information later on, because you have it, it's all stored. Really, really cool. That's such a basic thing, you think, but it's something that everybody needs, almost everybody needs, I would say. Everybody who has a meeting. So that's just one example of this. So we see that, yeah, I mix it a little bit with blockchain, because I think if you mix blockchain and AI, something fantastic is going to come out of it, right? Blockchain is going to put everything in a digital format, but then you just have the format. You need to crunch that data, and you can use AI for that. And so also blockchain is an emerging technology that's coming very, very fast. Again, the UAE government wants to be on the forefront of this. There's a blockchain agenda. By 2020, all government entities have to have some form of blockchain going forward.
Right. Now we talked about startups, and we talked about opportunities for startups, and one of the needs of the startups often to tackle these opportunities is to get funding. And funding is also an area where you could wonder how are decisions made, how is that process done today in beta, and can AI help you to actually de-risk startups and make faster, better decisions?
This is not a smart microphone.
Yeah, so today I service make assessment and see how I got data. Yeah. So today when we look at the early stage investment, we don't have that much data to analyze. It's pretty much dependent upon a very intuitive thinking or a subjective assessment, whether the entrepreneur has the capability to execute, how's the team. But when you go towards like Series B or C round, right, that's where you have like a lot of data that's both internal and external to make a more informed decision. So you're very right, that in today's world, in Silicon Valley, there's a huge investment going in AI. It's almost like 300 times more than what happened last year. But the venture capital themselves, like adopting AI and enable them to make a smarter decision, yes, it's a question. So if I look into what a venture capital business model is, right? They're only looking for those kind of hits which can multiply their investment. Now today, 1 out of 10 companies is successful. So can AI actually increase this probability to 50-50, or let's say 2 by 3? And that's the question. Can you identify a laggard before the market rejects, or can you actually identify a hit before anyone does? So this is really the problem that we're trying to tackle. So earlier, this is the trend that we see even in venture capital industry, that it's moving from subjective intuitive thinking to really more data-driven decision making, where you would take assess, let's say 20% of the internal data, like how's the founder, how's the team cooperation, but 80% to the market outlook, customer, competition, timing, regulatory framework. So the question is that not where we are today, but what is likely to change. And that is in this risk-reward equation, you're minimizing the risk, and you can actually have a much more informed, smarter decision. But I actually say that it's not only about the investment, but also about managing investments. The board members absolutely have no clue how the startups are doing. They will actually believe the story what entrepreneurs are gonna tell them, which can be biased. But if you have like sophisticated AI where you can really benchmark like that's my startup, how is it doing against competition, you can get a very unbiased, informed output for yourself.
All right. Yeah, I think I heard this also from a few VCs and angels that they would like to have much more data to be able to track startups and not only make the decisions earlier, but also know if the performance is what is expected. While we're still on the subject, and going back a bit to the government focus, if you would have to give some advice on startups, what are the focus areas where you see most potential, and where there has been so far most interest from different government entities?
Well, I mean, every sector, every vertical is going to be affected by it. Can you hear me? Yeah. So every vertical is going to be impacted by AI. And from agriculture, if you think of, I don't know, Monsanto is investing a lot in acquiring startup, whether from custom to image recognition, and where's the right time and the right place to deploy this, from that to logistics. If you think of the massive usage of robots that Amazon, for example, is taking advantage of. And I mean, if you are asking me.
Let me just rephrase the question a little bit. I think if you look at what the government does, I think there's a lot of areas where I think there's a lot of big players that are in there. We talk about the IBMs, the Accentures, the others that basically have the muscles maybe to do larger pilots and so on. But I think if you look at areas specifically like which are high on or have been high on the agenda in the country, like healthcare or education.
Yeah. We really need very sophisticated solutions that usually come from startups. I need to say that. And so there's space for everyone. It's not just for big companies. There's more medium enterprise and also startup can play a role.
If I can add, I think the areas where AI or startups can make a big impact is really where there's large amount of data, and AI is really computers are able to process a large amount of data and find patterns. So everywhere there's lots of data that's not utilized, where you can take advantage of machine learning and AI, that's where you can really create value. And I agree with you. AI will make a big difference in pretty much every sector.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, we already have a massive number of technologies and tools and approaches for solving a lot of the current challenges. I would say it's more a matter of a change in the mindset. So finally, this time has come. Okay, the fourth revolution has come. So you know probably much better than myself that. Plenty of techniques that we are using right now are, for example, from the 60s, okay, from the 70s. So why before? Okay, it's not just about matter of data availability or computer power. It's just the mindset is changing.
All right. Earlier, Hans Christian, I think you talked about the acquisition of data and open data, and how difficult is it today for startups to acquire data and basically to have enough support, if you want, to develop these learning algorithms, and also how quickly can they adopt AI?
Well, that's a very easy question to answer. Startups are generally extremely agile, and we actually measure companies, if we should invest in companies, by their agility, the level of agility. To give an example, I think the company is called Cognizant. They're sitting in Egypt. Now, it's a company that have pivoted several times. Now, they have some web crawling technology. It's a robot, basically. It just goes out there, picks all the data they need for a particular client, and tells them, these are all the competitors they have, these are all the prices, and this is where you should position yourself, like this.
Now, this is a very interesting comment, because actually recently I stumbled, I was actually looking into developing something like that myself, and I realized that most companies, like if you take LinkedIn for instance, or others that have data, like web scrapping is going against their license agreements. So basically, you cannot get any type of data. So a lot of these companies that had that approach, a lot of startups are now being shut down or cut out of that system.
I'm sorry, that means your venture didn't fly, right?
No, I didn't start.
Okay. No, but in this case, if it's legal or if it's not legal, I think startups are a little bit of a gray area. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you probably have to, and be successful, you probably have to have an ego the size of a truck. Because people are going to tell you, just like Jean-Luc just told me, that it's probably illegal, you can't do it, and the whole thing with blockchain, for instance, is there is no regulation. So should you not do blockchain? No, of course you should. If innovation waits for regulation, there will be no innovation, right? Anybody agrees with what I said right now? Yeah. Okay, we have some support. Okay. No, that's just the thing. And if you look at just another thing with blockchain in China. In China right now have just shut it down, right? Not the distributed ledger, but the cryptocurrency. The informal over-the-counter blockchain market is about 3 billion now. It's about 3 billion. They couldn't stop it, right? So innovation is going to happen regardless if it's legal or if it's not legal. The question is, can you manage it? But to return to your question, yes, it is startups. What was the question again?
There is two approaches. One is to take open data, which you get, let's say, from government or other entities, or one is to have a search engine that basically gets whatever is available and accessible.
Yeah. No. So there's no doubt in my mind that startups are faster, more agile in getting data, and they are succeeding today in that. I just want to mention one thing that just shows how desperate large corporations are. We get approached a lot by large corporations today. I sat with one of the world's largest car manufacturers today with our whole top management. They're so poor in innovating that they go to a small startup with virtually no resources for help. Now, so what's happening? Why is that so? Now, if you look at these large corporations, that's probably somebody at the very top between 40 and 60 years old. And he's instructed people that are probably around 30 to 40, 45 years old, middle management. And they're selling something for the one that's about 20 years old. Who do you think has the knowledge of what the market wants? It's not the board, right? You need to turn it around. And that's what we are seeing. We're actually going to try that probably next year, where we're going to have the young guys, the 20 years old, mentor the older guys, people my age, right? Because I'm not the one who's going to invent the new app. I'm not the one who's going to invent the next best web crawler. It's these young guys. I got my first laptop when I was 17, 16, and my son got a laptop that was stronger than my corporate laptop when he was 9. Who do you think is better at using the computer? Obviously. Okay.
Back to Jorn. One of the things you touched on earlier was also competition, and today when we look at let's say strategy done in large corporates, it's done once a year, and typically they don't pick up weak signals, so they tend to work with the things they know, a lot of inside data, and how do you change that? How do you change that strategy process, and how do you basically again change the mindsets to work with maybe data much more earlier, and also maybe change these cycles?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that a little bit before. I think there's definitely a culture change that needs to be done to embrace AI. But if you think about AI is very generic. AI is not solving any problem in itself. You need to really ask which problem you want to solve, and then how AI is applied. And I think for competitive intelligence, external information combined with smart machine learning technology is phenomenal. It creates enormous amount of advantages. The example that you talked about, pricing, so you have crawlers that in real time can tell you what the prices of your competitors are, how they changed. And you can also track their advertising spend. So there's a tremendous upside and tremendous benefit of using AI for competitive intelligence. And when that's the case, the smart companies will use them and will gain ground. The slow companies will fall behind, and that's how AI will get the traction. And I think the smaller companies, the nimble companies, will have an advantage in that regard. And I think a country like UAE, with a visionary leadership, can foster an environment where every company are, incentivized to think about how AI can be used and become much smarter about how they run their business.
Right. Anita, from your, let's say, from your view, what is holding back companies from, let's say, adopting these type of technologies where it's this outside insight that basically would start helping you redefine your strategy or drive your strategy?
And so how I think it is that it's pretty much like because of lack of infrastructure and skill sets. So if you look into the data, data usually is three pillars. You need large volumes of data. Then the data is always changing, that's velocity. And then you need variety of data. So now today we have all been talking about a lot of not just internal data, but now external data. All sorts of information which is completely unstructured. Not talking only about social media, but talking about job postings, talking about what competition is doing, any kind of source. So today, like these companies, the existing systems are not equipped to handle this kind of large amounts of data and bring it like, in one repository of truth and make sense out of it. So this is quite complex. To make this happen, you need really, really sophisticated systems, and at the same time, you require highly specialized data scientists, which are one of the most wanted now, the profiles that even wanted in Silicon Valley. So combined with these challenges, like it makes it much more difficult for the companies, even if they intend to. But at the same time, I mean, AI is not new. There are some companies which have been using AI for last 15 years, 20 years. If you look into FBI, Homeland Security, of course they have been predicting. They've been doing much long before than any of the companies today. Some of the companies are now doing started doing banks. They're using, for credit card fraud, just looking into it, if someone has used the credit card with the same merchant, If someone has used credit card yesterday in Paris, how can it be? So all these things AI can interpret and can cut down the cost. So are the insurance companies. So today we see that the companies are focusing on one particular element and not really on a large scale. But I believe that it's just a matter of time. I think as your competition will start doing it, you will have no choice. It will become imperative for them to adopt this.
You touched on jobs and skill sets, and maybe that's a question I want to ask back to Davide from the government side is, what type of new roles do you see you guys need, and are there new roles that you have created specifically for AI?
Okay, well, consider that till 2 years ago, at the government, we didn't have a data analytics department. This department was created 2 years ago when I was hired for this department. And I remember I had just a couple of guys with me. Then advanced analytics section was created. Now we are almost, already 10 people, let's say. In the AI lab, we are 12 people, so it's a total of 22 people out of 200 employees as mapped by government. And so we hired data scientists, we hired data engineers, and but also AI business developers and AI data analysts because of the Smart platform, the Pulse platform, because of this AI platform we are in the process of rolling out, and also because of the blockchain platform. And as a note, I would like to add that we are also in the process of integrating this platform, and that this will give us really huge opportunities for AI.
Okay, quickly back to Anvita then. How do you see let's say, the role of leaders or the job description of a corporate executive change? Looking at all that data and AI, becoming so important, in their daily lives.
Yeah, I think it has to change. But I think when to start with an interesting fact. 35% of the jobs that existed 15 years back don't exist today. And 35% of the jobs that exist today is not going to be any more available after 15 years. So of course, we are rapidly changing, and all of us, the corporate executives, have to get adapted to get these new skill sets, have to get adapted to the smart machines, the ability to work with them. So if I look into the near future, right? You talked about pricing. I think one of the interesting things when I was managing e-commerce in Southeast Asia is not just about real-time tracking the prices and changing it, but we even looked into that. Okay, if my competitor doesn't have the stock, let me increase my prices. Those kind of strategies. But even if I had a limited budget, then what do? Should I actually, spend on marketing, ad spend, or should I cut down the prices? What will bring the more impact? So those kind of decisions, right? AI can support these corporate executives to take it and, a much more informed decision. But if you look into, let's say, a future outlook, I don't think so that AI will ever replace these corporate executives or managers. In terms of our management decision making, there are lots of factors which we took into account about the history of organization, culture, but also a lot of decisions in the light of ethics, and empathy, which AI will not be able to, simulate. So as I see that, it's going to be a great partnership where corporate executives will bring the skill sets of human judgment, gut feeling, creativity, entrepreneurial mindset, passion, while machines or AI are going to actually make some of the repetitive, transactional, pattern matching work much faster, much more, cost effective. And that's going to result in a much increased productivity, which is going to create new opportunities and roles.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. I totally agree with you. But I think for executives that are going to succeed going forward, they need to be very data proficient. And I would even argue data science proficient. And the reason why I say that is that, as you were mentioning, AI will be very instrumental in decision making. But I think it's very dangerous if we leave AI to spit out an answer and then you just follow that recommendation. Because AI is not perfect. And contrary to many beliefs, AI is not unbiased. AI is actually very biased. It's biased by its design, biased by its training data, and biased for specific use cases. So I think what's going to differentiate great leaders from good leaders is that great leaders will have the strength and the capability to challenge the AI, to question the AI, and to really make sure that the recommendation from the AI is relevant, that it's really factoring the right underlying information. And I agree with you, computers are not going to replace executives, And I do think that an executive that just follow the recommendation from AI will be replaced because they don't add any value. But I do think that human judgment will have a role to play. And if you think about AI, one way to think of AI is that you have 20,000 analysts that work day in and day out. So whenever there's a problem, you want to prices are changing, and they analyze and do simulation. What would be the best call to make? And they present the analysis. But you as an executive still needs to make a judgment call. And AI is really a tool, and it can be like a GPS. You understand where in the landscape you are, but you need to make a judgment call. Do you want to climb that mountain straight on, or do you want to walk around to get to where you want? And that's the role of the human being.
All right. Quick question to Hans-Henrik before we go to the closing question. We talked about how startups can build AI systems, how the government needs AI solutions, how it improves decision making, and how is AI, or what potential AI have for SMEs?
Okay, so when startups ask me, give me a recommendation, what should I be focusing on? I always, or very often, recommend a book by Michio Kaku on the future. I think it's coming actually quite true what he's saying. What's happened in the next 30 years, the next 60 years, the next 100 years. AI has the potential, AI is going to permeate every single thing, so every single industry. As I was saying before, corporates is still an area that's overlooked by startups. If startups are looking at developing AI that can be used by large corporates, and I'm talking, the big corporates of today, Thales, Deutsche Bundesbahn. These corporations, they are really struggling. Some of them are actually still sleeping. And there are enormous potential of changing the whole society and building applications that these big corporations can use. So I think that's one of the low-hanging fruits that they need to focus on.
All right, last question before we ask the audience for a few questions. I think you briefly, Jon, you briefly touched on this in your previous answer, and that is the bias around AI. When you read in the press about AI articles, you see a lot about kind of doomsday article and robots are going to take over, and how real is that threat, and how do we avoid that type of thing to happen?
Yeah, so we use AI often in this conversation, and I think AI is very misunderstood, and I think the people within the AI industry is the one to be blamed for it. So when I studied AI in my youth, one of the things that surprised me was artificial intelligence. It's not intelligent at all. The way I actually look at AI is that it's really branding and marketing of a computer's ability to process large amount of data and find patterns. The way they find patterns is using statistics. So the field that all of us hated at school, statistics, is really what AI is today, and as this new technology. And I also think the terminology used around AI, the machine is learning. We talk about machine learning capabilities. We talk about training. We talk about cognitive science. These are words that is very confusing for people outside the AI industry, because outside the AI industry, these words have a different meaning and different qualities than what it really means in the AI industry. So for that reason, I will maintain a computer has zero intelligence. It's a dumb, blunt instrument that executes exactly what you tell it to do. It's like a calculator. It's just a very sophisticated calculator. Within the computer, when we talk about AI, there's no mythical being that spits out the right answer. There's no thinking. There's actually no learning. It's all mathematical algorithms and processes. So from that perspective, as much as I admire, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, all these things, from my perspective, the doomsday scenario that I present is very flawed. With the best of my abilities, and I say that with a lot of humbleness because these people are pretty sophisticated people, and they know a thing or two about technology, but with the best of my ability, I don't see a doomsday scenario. And not the doomsday scenario where AI is taking over. That said, I do think that AI needs to be implemented thoughtfully, because even though I say AI is not intelligent, AI is incredibly powerful, incredibly effective, and will permeate every industry and pretty much any software that you imagine. So for that reason, when you implement it, you need to implement it with a lot of thoughtfulness. And there are applications of AI today, for example, in Facebook, the social network all of us use, that has unintended negative consequences, where it's very likely that Facebook was actually used to influence the presidential election. So I think there are a lot of unintended consequences of AI that we need to be mindful about. I do think there's actually even a role for regulations to come in, because I don't think companies can be expected to regulate themselves. And as long as we're thoughtful about that, I think AI will be one of the most positive forces for good. It will eradicate a lot of the diseases that we have today. It will feed the billions of increased populations that the planet is facing. It will solve a lot of the energy problems even that the globe is facing. But it needs to be implemented mindfully.
I actually want to add just an interesting anecdote, but it says that how AI is not intelligent. I don't know how many of you read the recent news that an AI actually won the Texas Hold'em poker championship against humans. So everyone was, confused, right? How can a computer system bluff, or, this is really very particular to humans. How can you do that? And if this is possible, then I don't know where humans would go. But what exactly, what was the logic behind that? The AI system was able to map a lot of permutation and combinations, right, on the table, which a human mind cannot possess. But it also had its ability to actually play against himself, which a human cannot also do it, because you cannot be, your opponent and yourself at the same time. And then, in between the tournament, the AI was actually learning from the mistakes, of the opponent and learning from it.
So this is complete mathematical. This is like pure logic, pure algorithm, and no intelligence.
Okay, so just comment again. I think maybe we need a little bit of nomenclature here to divide it. There's basically three types of artificial intelligence. You have ANI, or artificial narrow intelligence. This is what you see today, what Amazon is using, or what the autonomous cars are using. An autonomous car is, we would say, incredibly sophisticated. But ask an autonomous car to make a cup of coffee, and you will realize it's going to fail. Right? Then you have AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. This is what we are a little bit scared about. It would be the level of a human being. We can probably simulate the intelligence of a fly today, about 70 million neurons. And then you have ASI, which Elon Musk is afraid that Alphabet or Google accidentally will make. So of one famous artificial intelligence scientist said, why worry about ASI? It's a little bit like worrying about overpopulation of Mars. We have to get to Mars first, right? So there's still a lot to go. One other comment is also, you can see how big companies are struggling. You all are familiar with Alexa, I presume, right? Alexa, there's 5,000 people working on Alexa today. And Amazon has gone to a great length, have just announced that they want to work with the team that's doing Siri. Why? If you have 5,000 of the best scientists working on your artificial intelligence, why do you need more? Do you need more? But there you can just see, this is an example of, they say, well, this is probably the hardest nut to crack in our lifetime. We're still very far away, but they will try to crack that nut.
Yeah, I just want to comment on this general intelligence, so that computer will be smarter than human beings. I live in Silicon Valley, and every there is, fascinated and, completely caught up in how artificial intelligence and computers will be smarter than human beings. I actually don't think that is very realistic. I find it very likely that it will never happen. Because the human brain is so much more complex than what I think the technologists in Silicon Valley want to give it credit for. I had this in-depth discussion with a neuroscientist, and after that conversation it was clear, you almost know nothing about the brain. And in neural networks, if you talk about that we are using our algorithms, they're not even close to simulate the proper neural cell. So, for me, all these worries about computers being smarter than human beings is hard to really fully comprehend. A computer, if you have an army of analysts that in real time, instantaneously, can come up with all sorts of analysis for you, right there and then, that's what a computer is. And you get the analysis. But after that, you need to make the calls.
All right, now we have still time for taking a few questions from the audience. So who wants to start? Don't be shy.
Hi, I want to say thank you for everyone coming out. Great panel. My question in general is for the entire panel. It's for a topic that's very dear to me. It's two-part question. One is you start aggregating all this information and data, what do you think the greater impact is going to be for GI, so government intelligence, how we can make actual policy using better information? And the second question is, out of everybody on the panel, whose job gets automated first?
So governmental intelligence, I think, already we see a lot of AI being applied in governmental intelligence, and I imagine you're talking from one state to another. Yeah, and I think that we have no idea how much AI has actually been applied to that already. And I think which jobs will be automated first? the jobs that computers do better than humans. And there are a lot of jobs that computers do better than humans. And that sounds terrifying, but if you think about it, all of you have a calculator that can do the square root of any arbitrary large numbers faster, more accurate, and better than human beings. So it's not something to be scared about. We are really removing jobs where computers do a better job, and then humans, hopefully then can move on to do more value-added jobs.
I think I agree with him. I think it's just the jobs which are repetitive, transactional, very administrative. Yes, I mean, like now today, even if you do not realize when you're speaking to an AI chatbot or a call center person, like it's so seamless today, right? So I mean, some of the jobs which are just gonna free humans with much more time and much more productive time, right, rather than taking over their jobs.
Right. Any more questions?
Can I just comment on that thing you were saying? Okay, so if you take an example of hedge funds, I don't know if you've heard that, but 6 of the 8 best performing hedge funds in the US are run entirely on AI. There's those very, very high paid MIT scientists, mathematical scientists, they have lost their jobs. That's just one example.
Right.
Hi. My question is about the healthcare industry, actually. And the theme that came across everything that you were saying was the importance of data in AI. In the region here, we know data is quite scarce, especially in the healthcare industry. It's sensitive information, it can't be released publicly. So 2 questions, I guess. What's the role of the government in helping liberating this data? And 2, how do they protect the confidentiality of their patients?
Well, I can guarantee that we are all fully aware of the sensitivity of some data, and in this process of linking the blockchain world with artificial intelligence one, you cannot imagine how many meetings and procedures and policy are actually on the table to protect the citizen rights.
Since you mentioned blockchain, there's actually a pilot ongoing, or there was a pilot ongoing with blockchain and using KSI technology from Gartner to for healthcare, electronic health records, to secure that using blockchain and using KSI technology. And that I'm not sure if that pilot's already concluded, but that had a Dubai Health Authority do and Gartner involved.
That was what we were alluding to, the Open Data Project. That is the Open Data Project.
Just a comment on this one in particular. If you look at what is being done in the US, they have something called Blue Button for healthcare data. So basically every healthcare entity, insurance, they're all allowed to, they all have to provide that data available to patients. But not only available, they have to provide it available in electronic format. And the Blue Button allows you to give consent to share that data with anybody else.
Just to add to what David was saying, why blockchain is so fantastic is because it will really, really protect the information. That's the huge plus. And you don't have your files lying around somewhere. Those days are over, right?
All right, next question. In the back, there's somebody back there, behind the camera.
I'll just shout the question if that's all right. Cool. Thank you for that. My question is regarding education. My question is regarding education. Lord, you mentioned that you got your computer at 16 and your child got it at 9. There are unborn children who will be interacting with technology at possibly younger ages. The divide between the, can you hear me all right? The divide between the global north and south is closing in terms of access to technology and access to information. So when it comes to new technologies such as outside insight, will there be a manner for information regarding education, or the way that education is approached will be real-time and external and accessible, and what does that look like for people in the global south?
I think I want to start with a kind of interesting fact, right? I don't really remember like which year, but when the printing press was first released, the Ottoman Empire actually banned this, right? For 300 years, because they just wanted all the information, not to be distributed and keep it to themselves. But after 300 years, like even it was invented, it came out. Yes, the information became available in books. But even if you look at today, we have all kinds of information available in our phone. And the amount of the information we generate in 2 days is actually from the dawn of civilization to 2003. This is the amount of data that we have in our pockets. But how, today, I can even talk about the business schools today, right, education. It's not that like something like, was especially taught at Harvard or INSEAD or LBS that is not available to others. It's just nothing like that. It's an artificial network. But what happens is like that, even though you have access to all information, you just don't have the time, right? Even a child from village is kind of like struggling to meet the basic needs, where he can think about becoming Elon Musk. So what the access to information and this kind of stuff, which AI will actually enable, but not the knowledge. So what I say is like, today, like if AI and this kind of stuff like intelligence is created, the information is accessible, is still the humans would be free to actually create more new knowledge. Would be more productive, than actually utilize their time for better something, rather than just meeting basic needs. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I think education is an area with lots of opportunities for AI. I think education is an area that is, very sadly outdated. And, everyone here uses Facebook. Most people use Facebook. And Facebook uses very sophisticated AI to optimize for engagement. You constantly go in and check. It's alerts, you get likes, there are lots of AI that you use to make sure that you spend as much time as possible on Facebook. And there are lots of side effects of that, which is bad. But imagine if you have an education software that uses some of the same gamifications to constantly prod you about whatever topic you are studying, whether it's math, whether it's history, and so on, and you make it engaging, interesting, a technology that can assess your skill level and push and challenge you on the area that you're not so strong. You can constantly, individually adjust to your specific strengths and weaknesses. I think that could be phenomenal. And I happen to be quite often in Africa. We have a school for software entrepreneurs in Africa. And one of the things that I actually I'm really, really encouraged and optimistic is that there is enormous amount of information available on the internet today, and they use it. I remember I was printing an article at TechCrunch that I thought was really interesting. I think it was about growth hacking or something like that. And I brought it back to the school. And the students looked at that and said, yeah, that's a good article. That was old. That was like last week. And I felt so embarrassed and stupid. This was an online article. I printed it and brought it with me to show them. And then, of course, we're all over that, plus all sorts of other things. So, you know, I feel quite optimistic. You know, there are lots of things that needs to be better, but I do think in this time, the world has never been better for talent. The availability of information, the availability of classes and so on online is phenomenal. And I do think that will benefit also people in the South.
I totally agree with you. I'm optimistic as well. I think that we are so much concerned about how AI or new technologies, generally speaking, can negatively impact our lives, that we are not considering how much positively these new technologies are currently impacting the lives of billions of people.
Okay. We have been told to stop about 5 times. I just can't stop talking. Okay, so to answer the gentleman's question, yes, EdTech, basically, is coming very strong. I think there should be a very, what you need in the future, you need people that are very good at working in teams. That's very, very important. And you need certain skills that AI cannot deliver. Leadership, for instance, right? So you need to be able to learn to work with other people. So I think that's something that you learn in schools or maybe in university later on. But apart from that, I think you can use AI to speed up the learning. You need to be able to speed up. You need to be able to, if somebody's taken off in the class and let's say math, why should he be held back if 29 other students are just slower than him? You know? But you need to learn these social skills. So I think it's a balance. It should not be all online and no teachers in the room anymore. But I don't think it should be hardcore and say, no, you need a teacher to teach all this. There are actually a lot of courses that are taught better online today than with a teacher. Yeah.
Right. I will not comment. So this is the end of this panel. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and I'd like to thank my panelists and a big applause for them.